Good evening, YouTube. Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. Today's been interesting so far. Showers and storms widespread across the eastern half of the country, and out west we're prepping for another system. And then also we had a cold course set up that got upgraded to an enhanced risk as it went through Ohio and parts of Indiana earlier today. I think at this point the worst of the storm threat's over, but showers and storms can't be ruled out. And now we are going to be starting to watch towards the Great Lakes for a little bit of a lighter lake effect snow event to be unfolding. Then also later into this month, things look pretty interesting, so I'm going to go ahead and touch up on that as well. So we're going to dive in on all of this here real quick. We'll start out with the severe event that we were looking at earlier today. This enhanced risk is about to be no more at this point. Last severe thunderstorm watch is in effect, and it's starting to be trimmed away at here. Wind reports are relatively isolated, but of course this was a local severe threat. This wasn't a very widespread event. The dynamics pretty much came together mainly over Ohio. There was a severe report that ended up being over Iowa, but for the most part towards northern Ohio is where the greatest concern of severe weather was going to be today. It's mainly a threat of damaging winds. There was a chance of a brief tornado, but that did not seem to come to fruition. I think we're just about done with this with this threat for tonight, and then after that we're in the clear for severe weather. In case you didn't see it, over here towards the corner of the screen, if this will load, I've been having Wi-Fi issues today, so hopefully this video will even go up. But if you were to have seen that earlier, then there's also a wintry threat over towards the northeast. So we'll have to go ahead and cover that as well. So this could be a bit lengthy as a result. Try to see if I can somehow refresh and trick this thing into working a little bit. Whatever the case, seem to be struggling with the Wi-Fi here. Okay, so we got that discussion to load after all. I was worried for a time, but it looks like we're starting to get back in business here. So the blue line is our surface freezing line, and this is where we can expect a wintry mix of precipitation. This is over towards the Adirondack. I was concerned about a freezing rain threat around this region, and it looks like that is potentially going to be coming to fruition. How much we see is still in question, but there's high confidence that we could see up to about 1/10 of an inch here. And this stretches all the way through the Adirondacks over towards northern Vermont and New Hampshire and into parts of Maine. So we'll have to keep an eye on that as well. Speaking of winter weather, here's what we've looked at over the last couple of days as far as snowfall is concerned. Large swath around Nebraska where we could get to about 6 to 8 inches. Few areas where we get to 12 inches, and even one spot where we're getting about 18 to 24 inches, mainly towards south central Nebraska. The snow threat further to the east was kind of overplayed just a tiny bit. There was a decent area where we were getting up to about 6 to 8 inches, but for the most part, widespread 2 to 4 inches. And on the outer edge here, we're looking at about an inch of snow. Pretty solid work. Pretty solid storm system. Pretty solid work done by Izzy, so to speak. Hopefully everybody did what they were supposed to do to keep themselves safe through this event. And then when we look at the rainfall on the warmer side of things, there's been plenty of areas where we're getting up to about an inch plus of rainfall. Small little swath over here towards, I'm going to guess this is Missouri and Arkansas, maybe even a little bit towards the Ohio Valley here, where we're getting up to about 2 inches plus. Small pocket of areas where we're getting up to about 3 inches. That could cause some flooding troubles. There was a slight risk for excessive rainfall here, so it did come to fruition in this area. I don't think this got upgraded to moderate though. We'll have to watch these areas, of course, in the future for more rainfall events as time goes on, because this is a very active pattern we're still in at this time. Alright, so let's go ahead and start taking a look at things. I don't know why we've jumped this far in the GFS, but this is the way things are set up right now. This is the latest GFS run. And as we roll this forward here, Make sure I show the date. Just heading into the 20th. Things look to be quieting down out east, out here in the eastern half of the country. Towards the west, however, that's where we start to see our next storm system taking shape. It's going to be a little bit of a warmer system. Towards those higher elevations, snow is still possible, but towards the southern sector, we could see potential for severe weather. Not the greatest risk I've ever seen, but it's there. So marginal risk, slight risk. We may see this in the latter half of the weekend and starting into next week. Showers and storms are possible out east, and then this system up here may draw in a little bit more cold air towards the northern states, especially the northern tier of the Midwest. And then as time goes on, this system really becomes more interesting as it begins to take shape. This could become a system for some parts of the Missouri and Mississippi River Valley. And then as this goes on, it could become a factor for the Tennessee Valley with snow wrapping around the backside of this. It's a neutral tilt system, so there is a potential for severe weather towards the start of next week. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Plenty of energy to go around with this one. And then there's another system that's trying to form in right behind it. Looks like it tries to become a cutoff low, and we'll have to keep an eye on what this ends up doing. But there is a small window of opportunity shown here on the GFS where this could get cold enough to drop some snow towards the central part of the country. This also brings a pretty intense cool down towards the southern plains here, especially towards Texas. We're getting close to that freezing mark yet again. And then also this has decent warm sector out ahead of it, so we'll have to watch and see what this does. Mid-latitude temperatures are going to really determine a lot with that. But if the temperatures are staying warm here, then we may have a little something here to look at here. And then we'll watch this system roll out quickly. Pretty strong forcing with this system. This looks like it's going to have a lot of wind energy with it. And then as this moves out, we have a pretty impressive tail that comes with this as well. Maybe a small shortwave system comes with this. And then there's a chance that we could get a really big cold blast. You can see how these isobars have tightened up a lot, and this energy is just coming in from the north. This could be a big shot of cold air that comes in for a large part of the country. How far south this goes is still the question given how far out we are, but that's a very interesting look for sure. And then this setup seems like it lingers for a couple of days at the very least. So we get to about 10 days out, we finally start to break out of this, but then it looks like we have another cold shot that tries to come through. Doesn't push very far to the south, and then there's another system that has to be watched towards the very end of the month. Maybe could be a southern plain type system. Warm sector is questionable at this point in time given how far out we are, but if this holds together, this could be an interesting severe weather setup too. And then as we go further and further into the start of February, things look like they start to calm down for the start of the month. But I think the second week of February could end up being a pretty active one. Like I said, with these longer range forecasts, it's a lot of hearsay as to what ends up happening once we get to about 300 hours out especially. So we're going to have to take some of this with a pinch of salt. But the pattern does not look like it's slowing down. When we make our comparison here with the euro, it's not too far off. Oh, wow. How are we to the end of this? Okay. So that being said, we take a look at the euro. Here's our next system coming in this weekend. This is a little bit older model. This is the 12Z. The 18Z wasn't going to let us look out far enough. We can see these little scattered pieces of energy here over the southeast. More showers and thunderstorms possible throughout the weekend. And as we move this along here, this has the cold air pushing a little further south, which I do find a little bit interesting. I don't think this amounts to anything super significant for the southeast, but we do have to watch for that wraparound snow being a factor around the mid-Atlantic now, especially towards the coast even. Will that moisture make it to be, or would the cold air make it in time with the moisture in conjunction to become snow or anything of a winter variety? Still yet to be seen. We'll get a better idea when we look at the preset models. and the surface temperatures, of course. Here's our next big system here. This is looking towards the start and towards the middle of next week, I would say. Pretty robust looking system, decent warm sector out ahead of it. Seems like there's a little bit of potential for subtle forcing, and there's energy right here as well. The track of the low is at an interesting spot too, so confidence is increasing a little bit on potential for a severe weather event towards the midweek to start next week. And then as time goes on, this could become a pretty significant winter storm. I have to check and see what the next name is. I've been doing a terrible job of keeping up with that. And then as time goes on, we have yet another system that pops in right behind that. And this drags in a lot of cold air, leading to a little bit colder than average temperatures for the southeast heading into the morning. But this doesn't last, of course. And then heading into the 29th, we're at the end of our model run. And it's pretty much the same with Canadian at this point. A lot of these, the Canadian and the GFS tend to be pretty identical. Sometimes it'll side with the Euro, but it looks like all three of them are in pretty good agreement in the short term, especially for this weekend. Once we get into next week, of course, big system comes in around the 24th and into the 25th. This takes a little bit more of a northerly track versus the Euro. But one thing to look at here also is still that there is some decent areas where we have like subtle forcing. And there also looks like there's a little bit more of a linear form to this as well. So we could be looking at a line of damaging storms as well. Embedded storms could be in there too, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. And then this has a pretty identical look. This cold blast makes it just about as far south as the Euro. But it's this storm system that I'm really curious about as far as the Canadian is concerned. It looks like these two storm systems are trying to interact here. I'm not sure how that ends up playing out because, of course, we're at the end of the model run. But if that scenario does come to fruition, that could be a big deal. So a lot to watch as we head towards the end of the month. We'll start to gain a little bit more clarity after we take a look at the temperatures. So here's a look at our temperatures. We're going to start out, of course, with the GFS, since that's what we started out with this video. Here's our cool down coming in towards the latter half of towards the start of the weekend here. Not a dramatic one for the southeast, but towards other areas it does get a little bit cooler. You can see some areas, especially towards the Rockies in the western half of the country, are definitely looking like we're going to be below average here. Temperatures getting into the teens and the higher elevations, some areas reaching at zero or even below possibly, just to start out your morning. And then as time goes on, of course, we start to warm up. There's a small push of cold air that tries to develop here, but this mostly will end up staying out of the country until about Tuesday. Coldest temperatures really seem like you're going to be towards the Dakotas. Not quite unexpected for you guys, but definitely not the most comfortable for sure. And then here's our warm sector heading into Tuesday and Wednesday. Very abundant warm sector that pops up around Georgia, which is a little bit concerning. And then this quickly looks like it moves its way into the mid-Atlantic. And it looks like we could almost see a little instance of what's called cold air damming right around the mountains here off of West Virginia. So there could be some potential here for some freezing precip possibly. We'll have to see what that ends up bringing forth. But that looks like it's, as of right now, it looks like a morning event according to the GFS. Then here's our next big cold shot that comes in on 26 behind that front. And then the cold air really starts to make its advance as we close out the month. That cold air starts to really stretch a little bit further and further south. Now we're getting more so out of the Dakotas here with these negative temperatures, and we're starting to get towards the Great Lakes, into the Ohio Valley a little bit. And as we get towards the far end of the month here, that cold air starts to retreat a little bit, but then there's another blast that comes in that starts to reinforce that as time goes on. And you can kind of see it up here. We have to be really suspicious around this region. I think with this cold air set in place, if some kind of system runs across it, it could cause some big problems here. We look out west, we're going to start out cold, but we're eventually going to start to break out of that as time goes on. You guys end up starting out with the cold air and eventually ends up moving to the east. And then as we look towards the south, it stays pretty warm for the most part. There's a couple of days, a couple mornings where it looks like it's pretty cold, but beyond that, I'm not thinking that we'll get anything too magnanimous at this time. Keep in mind, we're looking into the mid to long range here, so this is very much prone to changing. We can make our comparisons with the Canadian and the Euro. We'll start out with the Euro. It's not going to be too much different from what we're seeing with the GFS as of right now. So far, it looks almost identical, maybe a couple of points where that cold air pushes a little further south. We know towards the higher levels it was definitely doing so. And I forgot to put the date up, sorry guys. But for the most part, we're going to be staying about average for the first week, and then it's really towards the second week, I'd say about 6 to 7 days out, where things get a little bit more interesting, especially towards the 26th. It's about the end of this upcoming week. That's when things get a little bit chilly. Euro is a little bit colder. We have those sub-freezing temperatures working their way pretty far into the southeast now. We're getting Birmingham, Atlanta, Montgomery. You guys are getting those colder temperatures now. Of course, these aren't really hanging around too much. As time goes on, we'll have to see what ends up happening towards the very, very end of the month. I think this is going to be a very interesting point once we get to about the 27th to 29th in particular. Those would be the days I'm most interested in as of right now. We look at the Canadian, not really too much different. We're going to just set this one into a loop here. Try to get this video to speed up a little bit. I know no one wants to watch a 40-minute video. Canadian's a little bit colder at one point. Then it's time. Oh, wow. Canadian's actually quite a bit colder. I didn't really get a chance to look at the Canadian. I always look at the GFS and the Euro first. I always make that top priors because I'm able to use those a little bit more readily than the Canadian. But towards the end of the model run here, that cold air pushes pretty far to the south here, almost getting to Florida. Oops. Keep thinking the space button's going to pause that, like it's music or something. But drag that forward all the way to about 27th here. Once that front passes here, that's when things really start to get interesting. Canadian outcome could even result in some snow, maybe even for the southeast. Don't get too excited yet because A, we haven't even looked at that yet, and B, a lot of that's going to depend on storm track, moisture, and etc. And we're so far out that we can't really buy into that too much. So that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the preset models on all three of these real quick. Alright, so here we are looking at the preset models. I'm going to slow this loop down just a little bit so we can see everything. And here's what we have going on throughout the weekend so far. We'll get more in depth with the weekend in tomorrow afternoon's video. It'll be our weekend forecast. Some activity towards the southeast, a little clipper system for the Midwest heading into the weekend. Then towards Sunday and early Monday, we have showers and storms running rampant here. Next big storm system starts to really form around this time here. And it's an interesting setup with that one, because with that setup, we're going to actually go back for this one. You can kind of see where that low pressure ends up popping up right here. And we have that little clash of air masses here. It's a small area where we could even depict maybe a potential for some wintry precip. Maybe even a little bit of freezing rain possible here. But over here, you see this line of thunderstorms that's going to be associated with the cold front. Then right out ahead of that, there's showers and storms possible here too. Right around this little clear slot right here is where I'm a little suspicious, where we could get some prefrontal storms that end up being discrete, and it could lead to an increased tornado threat. As time goes on, we'll get more in depth with that, because we're still over 120 hours out. That's 5 days to be exact, or a little bit over. So it's going to be hard to really hone in on that, but Eventually, this does become a complete linear threat, some snow on the backside, and this weather threat ends up subsiding and becomes a big snow event towards the Ohio Valley. Then we watch this go off to the northeast, kind of fizzle out a little bit. But over towards the Adirondack, this could be a pretty healthy little topping of snow from what we've based off, in addition to what we've already gotten. Then as we roll this forward and go to the end of next week, Clipper system comes in, lake effect snow looks possible. Then right behind that, another little Clipper, similar deal. And this is the one I'm kind of interested in right around the end of the month. The positioning of where that cold air is set up is going to be a key factor in a lot of this. And the track of that low that's up here could be interesting. If these two were to merge, this would become a much bigger system. So far, the GFS doesn't have that happening. Mainly, this looks like a heavy rain threat, but you see how that cold air is in position on the north side of this, and this looks like it ends up dropping some heavy snow over towards West Virginia, towards the southern regions of the Ohio Valley and the Mid-Atlantic. Where that freezing line is going to determine a lot. And then this is also has the look of a very intense ice storm as well. Because remember that instance I was talking about of cold air damming, it's where those mountains will hold that cold air up in the higher elevations, and then that warm air will sneak in under it. And that's usually a classic freezing rain setup, and that's exactly what we see here. And then as time goes on, this has the potential of becoming a nor'easter. Hard to really buy into that, of course, right now because we're 330 hours out. But it looks like at some point before the end of the month, we could have something big on the way here. Especially towards the northeast, the Ohio Valley. We're watching you guys close, but don't sleep on this if you're in the Tennessee Valley or even the southeast. I mean, I got the feeling that it could get pretty interesting. But that's the end of the GFS run. It's as far out as we can go. As far as 240 hours is concerned, we can make some comparisons here, though. So we roll this forward, and we're mainly going to be honing in on the severe threat, as it looks like the atmospheric river situation we have out west is starting to calm down just a little bit, thankfully. Because I've been feeling bad for you guys out there. You've been getting walloped, especially if you are west of the Rockies. But now, here's where things start to get interesting. With this system, snow looks like it's a little bit more abundant towards the interior northeast. And then the rain seems to develop just to the north of where those mountains are in West Virginia. So there is a small chance where we could get ice here, maybe even towards Philadelphia. But for the most part, you're going to actually be rain. Mostly rain. There could be some snow on the backside of this, but this looks mostly like the track for an interior northeast event yet again. So you guys might not get any snow out of this if you're over towards New York, the Long Island area. If you do, it'll be relatively minimal at this time. So here's our next system coming in over towards Texas. Widespread showers and thunderstorms. And then that cold air does dip a little further south with the Euro. Euro seems a little bit colder in general with this. And as a result, we could see snow and ice over towards Wichita Falls even possibly. And just a little bit further over towards Dallas, there could be potential for heavy rain, maybe even some severe weather out of that. And then the severe potential increases a bit as this goes further to the east. That cold air makes it a little further south. If this could get some help from the Gulf, it could become an interesting situation for areas even around Mississippi. But this mainly looks like it becomes mostly a Ohio Valley, maybe even Tennessee Valley event. But this storm system also lends itself to being a little bit more of an interior event, more so than a Long Island event. So most of these guys over here, Philadelphia, New York, again, looks like there's pretty good confidence you're going to end up having more so rain than anything else. And that's pretty much what we got going on with this one. Canadian doesn't look too much different either from this. So there's our first system coming through. Here's our second one. That's going to be causing our rain through the latter half of this week and across the southeast. Small shortwave system. This looks like it becomes nor'easter. Similar outcome. Then here's our severe weather system that we're looking at here, about 120 hours out. Mainly looking like a linear threat. Cold air stays a little bit further to the north, also is being outran by the moisture. So this definitely becomes more of a dominant Ohio Valley and more so Great Lakes event. Snow does extend a little bit further out to the east with this system because of its track. And as a result, maybe some action for New York starting out, or maybe even Philly, but you'll end up transitioning back over to rain before all's said and done based off of this outcome. This next system looks a little bit bigger as we go forward with this, but it's pretty much a similar outcome. And then towards the 29th, we'll have to watch this system, of course, as things look really interesting with it. But that's a lot going on just with the preset models. We're not really going to get into the snowfall totals with that. And what we will do, though, is we will look at potential snowfall to come over the next 24 hours real quick before we close this one out. So here we are looking at the snowfall totals over the next 24 to 36 hours. Next system starting to form over the Rockies. Most of the higher elevations could be expecting up to about 4 to 6 inches. A couple of spots where we could get closer to 8. Towards northern Arizona, we could get up to 8 inches in a small pocket right here. But for the most part, I'm not too concerned with that. Excuse me. Then we take a look over towards Adirondacks. Pretty healthy dose of snow right there. Getting up to about 6 inches for most of you guys there. New Hampshire and Vermont, same deal. And as we go further north, actually, these snowfall totals seem to drop off a bit as we get into Maine. This is what the Canadian's showing us. Euro's got a similar look. For the most part, I have a feeling that all these are going to be in pretty good agreement with one another. Even the shorter range models are going to be in good agreement with the long range here. There is a small pocket here on the NAM 3 kilometer that shows slightly heavier snowfall, where we could get maybe closer to about a foot possibly in one spot. But this is, of course, towards the higher elevations where things are a little bit more variable. Same can be said over with this region over towards the Rockies. But not too much really surprising there. We take a look at our blend of models, and it's a pretty similar deal. Snowfall totals up to about maybe 6 inches for a lot of areas, or widespread pockets of where we could get up to about 6 inches, mostly in the higher elevations. Snow's relatively minimal otherwise, really. Small pocket of higher totals up in the elevations of West Virginia here, but most areas are going to be seeing mostly trace amounts of snow. A couple areas could see a little bit more than an inch, but other than that, it's relatively looking pretty quiet for the weekend. We'll get more in depth with that, of course, tomorrow. And of course, we'll have to take a look at the ice real quick, because I'm still a bit concerned about this region over here. It looks like the blend of models has kind of dropped off on that total here. Whereas before we were seeing concerns where we would be getting closer to that quarter-inch ice range, we're starting to drop off on that. However, towards the vineyards here, I'm a little bit more concerned. There's a small pocket right up in here towards, trying to make sure I have this right. I don't know if it's Rhode Island or Massachusetts exactly. That's embarrassing. I'm having a brain fart again. Second video in a row. But right around here, there's potential for a small pocket of quarter-inch ice, so we'll have to keep an eye on that as time goes on throughout the weekend. Of course, I'll make another update on this tomorrow as follow-up. But until that next video comes, that's the end for tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hope you drop a like, leave a comment if your area is expecting something interesting. Love to hear about it. And of course, if you haven't subscribed already, definitely do so. I noticed a large portion of my audience still isn't quite subscribed yet, so if you're enjoying the videos, I mean, come on. Make sure you're subbed so that way you can catch every video. But anyway, enough rambling for me. This has been Tire Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night.